Three, two, one. Oh, it must be Monday. This is our first show of the week. Monday, wow. And of course, it's Marco Mangelsdorf. It's Marco and me. Marco, hi. How's life on the Big Island?
Well, I tell you, usually Mondays are kind of manic, Jay, but just hearing you and knowing I was going to be talking to you makes my spirit feel oh so calm. So thank you so much for having me on again.
And to know that makes me feel more calm, so thank you for that. And now that we're ready for a show, let's start. Let's talk about what's going on in energy. Let's talk about the state of energy, the state of clean energy, the state of solar credits. We've had solar credits a long time. And the question is, what have they done? What have they done, Marco? That's an open question.
Well, that is indeed an open question, and just for the sake of accuracy, you are absolutely right. We have had them for a long time. The first that I'm aware of, the first solar tax credits came into existence in 1976, which was the year, at the risk of dating myself, I graduated from high school.
Wow. And you undate yourself, is what?
And it makes 39 years now that we've had some form of a solar tax credit here in the state, in the wonderful Aloha state of Hawaii.
Now, those original solar tax credits were for solar water heaters, right?
That is correct, because back in those days, solar PV was space age in terms of applications and very, very expensive compared to now. So it was very, very limited applications. And you're right, solar thermal was really ruled the roost up until around 2006, 2007, when solar PV started to really take off here and start to rival solar thermal as being a dominant solar technology that people were adopting.
Yeah, that's interesting because those years were 2006 and 7. Those years were prior to the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative under the, I guess it was the second term of the Lingle administration, which started in 2008 with the making of the HCEI agreement. So all the hubbub, came after the fact that we were already well into solar PV credits. And I guess the same group that was involved in the thermals years before, namely Cully Judd and the crowd, Inter-Island Solar, isn't it? That's his company.
Correct.
They were involved in the PV. I mean, they carried on the same notion, and they lobbied to extend the credits from one to include the other. And so by the time HCEI came around, it was already happening. And in fact, in a way, don't you agree that the existence of solar, PV solar in the state, and the existence of the solar credits covering PV solar was part of the reason we had HCEI in the first place?
Oh, I mean, it's all been a rather synergistic combination of multiple reasons, multiple forces that led to the HCEI back in 2008, and then the substantial growth in solar PV adoption from, like I said, 2006, 2007 until it peaked a couple of years ago or so. So, I mean, the tax credits have played are a huge, huge part of the equation as far as leading to the mass adoption that we see now, and roughly 1 out of 10 Hawaii homeowners having a PV system on their home.
Yeah, so, so here what you mentioned that before the show, that the solar credit amounted to, let me get this right, it's like $270 million out of the state coffers in the last big year. What was that, 2013?
Well, the last years that the Department of Taxation has data on is 2013, calendar year 2013. So in 2013, there was approximately $103 million claimed under the solar tax credit, which is a combination of both solar thermal and PV. And the year prior, in 2012, was 164 million. So that the combined total over 2012, calendar year 2012 and calendar year 2013, according to DOTAX, was something shy of 270 million. Correct.
Or an average of 135 million or so per year for each of those 2 years. And that really is extraordinary. I mean, first, in terms of a total, 135 a year, that's extraordinary. And to continue it year after year the way it was going, that's also extraordinary. And let me compare, if I didn't in our exchanges prior to the show, let me compare that with Act 221. I don't think Act 221 was intended to incentivize the development of the tech industry. It was adopted during the Caetano administration in the last days, and it was sort of evolved into its last known form, into its last known model, I should say, which was fairly complex, right before the Lingle administration. And then it was changed to be more draconian, more difficult on investors during the Lingle administration, and ultimately it was killed. It was prematurely killed before its sunset date through a combination of attacks by Lingle and by the press and by a few, not many, but a few erstwhile tech experts, quote, who didn't think that tax credits were a way to incentivize the development of the tech. And after it died, nothing came around to replace it. And after it died, a great number of companies that had been built on those credits and the benefits of those credits went out of business. And after it died, a number of tech professionals, programmers, and the like left town, never to return. And so actually you wonder whether we would have been better off if we never had the thing, because we had so much contention, so much trouble over it, so much argument. I'll never forget that the low point for me was when in the Honolulu Advertiser, Sean, I forget the last name, Sean, a reporter on many things, he came up with a headline in the shotgun seat on the front of the paper, and it said, Act 221 investors found to be wealthy. Oh my God, what will they think of next? That's horrendous. Investors, wealthy. This is a headline. Anyway, Act 221 was intended to create a tech industry. It didn't cost anywhere near what PV credits have cost the taxpayers. I mean, how can we reconcile that?
Well, although, and not being an economist, I can't offer a very insightful judgment on the question of, the very important question of, for every $1, for example, that does not go into the state general fund due to an individual or a company claiming a solar tax credit, Tom Lodat, who is an economist in the state who's written quite a bit on the subject of solar tax credits, I mean, his argument is that for every $1 that doesn't go into the general fund, there are at least, if I'm not mistaken, $2+ that are a benefit to the state in other ways. And again, not being an economist, I can't say whether I buy that or not, but just for the sake of balance, I mean, there is that argument out there. But I
want to pursue one thing though. The original question I posed to you: what have we done? It's got a double entendre, of course. What have we done with all this, the billions over the years for the solar tax credits? I mean, can you say that the primary result of all of that has been the development of a solar industry of some kind? Or is it more appropriate to say that the benefit of all of that has been, that 10% of installs around the state, where we have, percentage-wise, a larger percentage of solar on a rooftop, on individual rooftops than probably anywhere in the country. What is the real result, would you say, after these years of having and spending this kind of money on PV tax credits?
Well, in combination with the federal tax credit, which has been around in its current form since it was authorized by George W. Bush and started in 2005, so we've got 10 years worth of both federal tax credit, the investment tax credit, and years of the state tax credit. So it's really the 1-2 punch of both in combination that has led to a substantial increase in adoption over the years, mass adoption, I would say, that we've reached, and for leasing companies far and wide able to come and offer homeowners PV systems on their homes at essentially little to no upfront cost, which is, I mean, it's a good thing in that it has reduced to some degree, the amount of fossil fuels that have been needed in the past to generate electricity that is now being produced by solar. So it has helped to move us collectively in the direction that governors and legislators and renewable energy activists have been talking about for decades and decades, which is the state needs to be more energy independent, less dependent on imported fuels, more energy secure. So the tax credits have definitely aided in that effort to get to the promised land.
Yeah, and they've been great for the people, who've used them, because they pay little or no, after making the investment, they pay little or, with the benefit of the credits, little or no utility costs. They get very close to free power, and that's really something. But what about the other guys? What about the other fellows who, don't qualify, who are not in a property or a position or have the financial wherewithal to take advantage of the credits? How exactly are they benefiting?
Well, they haven't been benefiting as well. It hasn't been as good for them, obviously, and hence, just to touch back on something we talked about a couple weeks ago, the importance of Senator Mike Gabbard's community solar bill that was signed into law by the governor
Yes.
2 weeks ago to allow for folks who are in condos, apartment buildings, or living in areas where they can't put a PV system on their very own roof because they may not have their very own roof, for example, to be able to take advantage of solar. So, but I mean, it's been kind of late in coming, but it's moving in the right direction, certainly.
Yeah, well, that does address my question for sure. One other thing about this is you mentioned, in your writings that of that $270 million over the years 2012 and 2013, 50% of that has gone to out-of-state companies and investors doing business here in Hawaii. Now that's really extraordinary, because if you're looking to build companies, building an industry, like 221 was directed at that more than anything, you're actually sending a lot of money offshore here. How does that reconcile with the original purpose of the tax credits?
Well, that's kind of a thorny question, a juicy one at that as well, because you look at the past several years and how companies such as Sunrun and Solar City and Vivint Solar, SunPower, and Sonova, these are all companies that are based on the U.S. mainland, and they've all been, to one degree or another, quite successful over here, being able to offer homeowners residential leases and residential power purchase agreements where these companies are taking advantage, if I'm not mistaken, of the 24.5% refundable state tax credit. So, to me, it's kind of a loaded question as far as is that a good thing? You could argue that yes, it is, because these companies have allowed tens of thousands of homeowners to go PV, whereas they wouldn't otherwise have done so, perhaps. But there's also, as you mentioned, this outflowing of money from the state to companies thousands of miles away. So it's a loaded question.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say that the purpose of the tax credits can be compared, paralleled with Act 221, because 221 was intended to build an industry. That was the primary benefit of it, and to get investment in the state to build the industry, and it actually did that for a time until everybody started bashing it. And then in the case of the tax credits, it doesn't I don't think it's a good parallel because it doesn't really build an industry. As you say, it puts solar on the rooftop. That's what it does. And I'd like to continue our discussion after this break, and just discuss the policy point of the priority, because this $270 million is right off the top. In the case of 221, oh my goodness, people were so upset about spending way less for building a tech industry, and now I don't hear any objection to the 270, and I'm wondering what the priorities are when, for example, we have all these homeless people whose problems could be ameliorated with money, and various other issues. But let's take a break now and come back and pursue that. There's so much to talk about, Marco. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar, joins us by Skype audio from Hilo. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island and ER physician. Every other Tuesday, I get to host a show here on the ThinkTech program about healthcare. We call it Healthcare in Hawaii. It's really enjoyable for me to bring other healthcare leaders from around the state to talk about our pressing issues. Hawaii has long been the health state, but we need to keep up the momentum, the inertia, and with your help and with your participation, we can come and share all of the big issues that are pressing day to day. Thanks for joining us every Tuesday, alternating weeks from 2 to 2:45.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Wait, my friend.
All right, we're back. We're live. My name is Jay Fidell. Today is Monday. We're here on Marco and me, and Marco Mangelsdorf joins us by Skype audio from Hilo, Provision Solar, and we're examining the status of energy again on this wonderful show that I enjoy so much with him. Okay, so so priorities. Aren't we worried about so many other issues where the state doesn't have the funds for the social safety net, for the infrastructure? $270 million is a lot of money. And I remember the day when everybody was so antsy-pants about spending one penny. Why? Can you explain to me why there isn't more fuss about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give it a shot, Jay. Let me share with you first that it puts me in something of a uncomfortable, I don't know if I'd call it a quandary, but uncomfortable position, because, I'm not Lily White here. I founded the Hawaii PV Coalition 10 years ago, and this is back when PV was still it was the much younger, smaller brother compared to solar thermal here in the state. And my friends Cully, Judd, Rick Reed, and the good folks at the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, the HSEA, were the long-standing principal, essential advocacy lobbying group for solar here in the state for many, many years, probably going back to late 70s. And I felt that PV back then needed its own individual specific voice to be not necessarily diluted by solar thermal, although had been working solar thermal for years before that. So I've been very much involved over the years in terms of lobbying the legislature to be PV friendly. But I've kind of come full circle to some extent and taken a rather heretical view in the industry, which is typically once there is a government subsidy for any type of industry, any type of specific group, that group will fight like crazy, tooth and nail, to keep that subsidy from disappearing. And I've been public and I've been vocal for at least the past 2+ years that we need to have what I call an adult conversation about the fact, I believe, is that the PV industry has reached a level of maturity and mass adoption and reduction in cost that should allow it to stand more on its own 2 feet without the same level of tax credits that we've been enjoying for all these past years. So what I'm what I'm doing is really putting me at odds with virtually everybody else in the industry. But I tell you, the background for me, as of recently, is that we've got very serious healthcare issues here on the Big Island, where the main hospitals here did not get anything close to the amount of money that they requested from the state legislature this year, and there are real, painful cuts taking place in terms of people losing their jobs and services being cut significantly. And you could make the same observation about what's going on in the county of Maui as well in terms of health care. And there's also the recent news of the past week that we had a big, big jump in the number of homeless people here on the Big Island over the past year. And as a political scientist, I know full well that it's not direct causation that, well, so much money is going to solar tax credits, and that's money that's not going to the poor and the elderly and the keiki. I know that's too facile and oversimplistic of an equation, but when you have basic services from education, healthcare, and the like that are suffering real cuts, and real people in substantial numbers are suffering from those cuts, beyond my hat as a solar company owner and a longtime advocate of solar, I am taking a more macro perspective in terms of there's something wrong with this picture. And as a society and as a state where budget is tight, and as it's been pointed out by a number of people in the press, a number of legislators, and even the governor, I think, we are not really biting the bullet hard in this state in terms of dramatic cuts in the budget, because there's been a surplus over the past year or two, and that's been as a backup, essentially, in spending the amount of money that the state is spending right now. But there is not enough money to go around to take care of those most vulnerable people in our state. And by the same token, there is a substantial outflow to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, which would go a long ways, tens of millions, over here on this island to take care of the people who are in the most vulnerable position. Tens of millions of dollars, which is going out of state these past years, year after year, to companies based on the mainland who are making handsome, I have to believe, handsome returns on investment. So there needs to be a discussion, I think, beyond the narrow lobbying that's going on by the interested groups here, such as HSEA and the current Hawaii PV Coalition and the Alliance for Solar Choice, amongst others, as far as looking at a rebalancing, I think, of priorities in the state. It pains me deeply to see my own home, my own island here, where those folks who are suffering the most are not getting the type of care that we as a society need to give them.
Yeah, I'm amen to that. I'm thinking of all those trade associations you mentioned. They're all in favor of solar tax credits, continuing forever and increasing if possible. There's no lobbying organization or trade association that actually looks to moderate them, and as with 221, there needs to be a sunset. You have to, calculate and recalculate as you go forward whether it's still necessary to take money out of one guy's pocket and put it in another guy's pocket to achieve a given public purpose. Anyway, I agree with you, and I am very concerned about some of the points of our budget where we seem to be very short. We don't have the money, can't do this, that, and the other thing. Just look at the roads. We lost the war on potholes in Oahu. It hasn't really been fixed, and we don't have the money to fix it. So why are we spending on other things that way? I hear the money chairs. The money chairs are always saying, no, we can't spend. But then you find, for example, there's a thing in DBED called the charrette on transportation, on clean energy transportation. And they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to have experts come in here and report on what the charrette is a meeting, what the charrette has done, and huge amounts of money. And you say, wow, that's an awful lot of money. Should they really be spending that? Can't we do that locally? Don't we have the expertise here? Can't we stand aside and make our own decisions? Why are we so, why do we lack confidence in that way? Anyway, I mean, I'm just concerned that you get some people in government saying, no, we can't spend anything, but then you look at the net effect and you find we're spending huge amounts of money on things that really should not be at the top of the priority list. But that's just me.
Well, and it's an indication in our political system, not just here in Hawaii, but also in legislatures across the country, our own U.S. Congress, where you have committee chairwomen, chairmen, who exert a disproportionate amount of power and authority and discretion to either support bills or to block bills. And there are essentially less than a handful of power players in the state legislature, which is 51 House reps and 25 senators, comes out to 76 if my math is right. A handful of individuals in that total body of 76 that have a substantial amount of discretion to decide what bills are heard and what bills never see the light of day.
Yeah.
And I think it is very clear to me, from my Big Island perspective, that the solar industry and its various groups and lobbyists have been very, very successful at gaining the support of those power players in the legislature. And last session, there was not a peep about adjusting or discussing the solar tax credits. Not a peep, not a bill.
Now, I remember about 3 years ago, there was a peep, and there was all kinds of discussion with the energy chairs at the time about where is the sunset and can we ramp this down slowly instead of quickly, so that it doesn't do disruptive things to the industry. And gee, there was so much discussion about that, and all of a sudden, you must know about this, all of a sudden the discussion stopped. And now there was no talk about a ramping down of the tax credit. It was just, we're going to stay up there. And what happened there? Why did it stop? It seemed to be on a good track and then went a bad one.
I think what you're referring to, Jay, is that the State Department of Taxation under Neil Abercrombie made a decision several years ago that it was essentially tightening the rules and regs on the application of the state tax credit, which it was really high time overdue, because it was being abused by not a small number of individuals prior to that. What I mean by that is that you had a PV system that was put on a roof actually called 2 PV systems or 3 PV systems or 4 PV systems for the sake of doubling, tripling, quadrupling the tax credits. So Abercrombie put an end to that essentially by fiat through his Department of Taxation. There was this tremendous uproar in the PV industry about how that was unfair, how could he do that, it was going to destroy the industry. He even had, if I'm not mistaken, Earth Justice and the Sierra Club actually filed a lawsuit against Abercrombie and the DOT for doing that, but that lawsuit was tossed, it didn't go anywhere. And the subsequent legislative session, it was determined that, gee, we better do something about the tax credits in light of this terrible news from DOTAX. Well, that led to a lot of effort and talking, and a bill that made it through, if I'm not mistaken, it made it through to the conference committee at the end of the session, and it died in the conference committee. And then the fever broke, essentially, after that, and then in the subsequent legislative sessions, I think the attitude was, hey, it wasn't the sky did not fall, the world did not come to an end with these modifications under Abercrombie's Department of Taxation, and the risk of reopening the discussion on state tax credits when right now there is no sunset date and the benefits are still quite substantial. There's always the risk, if you restart the discussion, that you're not going to, when all is said and done, you're not going to have as beneficial a tax credit after the new law is passed and ostensibly signed as you did before all that started. So in other words, it ain't broke right now. Don't fix it. We like what we have. Let's not go there.
Yeah, and that's where we are now. Now, recently there was this shakeup at least in the Senate, where a longtime chair and leader in clean energy, Mike Gabbard, was relieved in favor of Lorraine Inouye from the Big Island. And I guess I would ask you, and of course Chris Lee, the chair of the Energy Committee in the House, is still in place and has been a very outspoken advocate for the solar energy installer associations. So where does that take us? Where are we now in terms of the mood, the tone of the legislature on this, following the shakeup in the Senate?
Well, one never knows until the next session starts and is open for business in terms of the priorities of the legislators and the priorities of the committee chairs. Lorraine Inouye, Senator Lorraine Inouye, who's one of the 4 senators from the Big Island here. Lorraine, real good person, a friend of mine and a customer as well, full disclosure. She is the chair of the new Senate and Transportation Committee, which I think was a really good idea to combine those two. Yeah. Really good idea. And since Lorraine ascended, so to speak, to the chair position, she has been one very busy wahine in terms of, as you can imagine, all sorts of suitors far and wide coming and wanting to, shall we say, educate her. So I think she's have a tremendous amount of respect and confidence in Lorraine to do the right thing, and I think she's in info gathering mode right now in terms of what does she want to do, what's important to her once the next legislative session opens for business in January. I can speak less definitively about Chris Lee. I think Chris has been very supportive of the PV and solar industry in general, and he's been rather skeptical. I'll leave it at that, skeptical of Hawaiian Electric, and essentially, unless you have one or both of those individuals who is willing and wanting to revisit the state solar state tax credit in the next session, it's likely that it's not going to go anywhere.
Well, and this would be an appropriate time for us to take a short break and come back and talk about the Hawaiian Electric Next Era deal and the stockholder vote on that deal. And I'm so excited that we can talk about that. Let's take a quick break, really quick break, Marco, and come back and talk about that, okay?
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I host Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii, and I do this because I care about science literacy in Hawaii. I want to spread the understanding that science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life. I want to make sure the broadest possible spectrum of people understand the beauty and the value of science and realize that science plays out each and every day of their lives. I want you to understand that science is fun. So we bring onto this show each week guests who are scientists, from astronomers to zoologists, and we talk about what they do and how they do it. But most importantly, we talk about why you should care about their work, why you should see that their work has value and impact on your life. So I hope you'll join us Fridays, 1 p.m. here on ThinkTech Hawaii. You can watch us via live stream. You can watch us recorded on Olelo, and you can see us each week. We hope you'll join us.
Okay, we're back, we're live, we're here. It's Monday, and we're enjoying time with Marco and me, Marco Mangelsdorf from Provision Solar in Hilo, Hawaii. So, going on to the last major topic of our discussion today, Marco, we always need to take stock of the Hawaiian Electric Next Era deal, because it is really important to the state, one way or the other. So I guess I'll ask you first. So what happened with the stockholders? They seem to have slid into first base there, and they all agreed, or at least a sufficient number agreed, so that that's not an issue anymore.
Well, just to bring us up to speed, was on May 12th when the shareholders meeting was convened in Honolulu, the HEI shareholders meeting, and it was announced that they were about 5 million votes, shares short of reaching the required 75% approval needed under state law of all 107 some odd million shareholders. So they essentially temporarily adjourned the shareholders meeting and reconvened it 4 weeks hence, and that was reconvened on the 10th of June, a little bit less than 2 weeks ago, and it was a squeaker. It was a squeaker. They just got over the bar of 75%, so they were, understandably, the HEI execs and the board and the NextEra folks were, I'm sure, very relieved to be able to make that announcement there on the 10th of June. So certainly good news from their perspective, and just to show you kind of how topsy-turvy this docket has been, it was 2 days later when PUC Chair Randy Iwase gave a rather in-depth interview with Katie Mickleseth at the Star Advertiser, where he was kind of giving his lay of the land as it stood then of the docket and the proposed merger. And he said that something along the lines of, well, we hope to be able to make a decision on this in June of 2016, which really puts it at the outer limit, literally, of what the applicants wanted to see. They were have been pushing for, from the very beginning, pushing for a decision by this December, which I think is pretty much crystal clear that ain't going to happen. And with the chair of the PUC saying we hope to get to it by June of 2016, is certainly could not be seen as very positive news, I think, from the applicants. But you know, I'm looking at the PUC website right now, the document management system, where you can go and see all the documents submitted, and we're up to now 456 total documents, and I haven't done a page tally for about 3 weeks, but we're probably in the 22,000 page range in terms of the filings, and the next marker, as I think of it, Jay, is going to be on July 20th. July 20th is when the 29 interveners, if they are going to submit testimony, which I see as kind of a preliminary tipping of their hand as far as support, do not support, or neutral. That's the deadline when the interveners will submit testimony, like I said, giving it a preliminary indication of, after all these 22,000 pages and all these IRs, information requests, and the response to the IRs, most of it public, some of it confidential, and so forth, we'll get a better sense of where people are sitting or standing in terms of support, opposition, or I haven't made up my mind yet.
Well, let me make a wild thought here, and that is they didn't intervene so they could support the deal. It doesn't feel that way. I don't have a list of the, whatever it is, the 30 of them here, but my recollection is that most of them intervened because they wanted to, express concern about the deal. So when they finally get a chance to express themselves in this next mark, I think we can expect most of them to be opposed to the deal, don't you think?
That's probably a reasonable assumption. I think the only intervener that has been more or less explicit about being fairly positive about it is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW. Mm-hmm. I don't recall that any of the other 28 remaining interveners have come out demonstrably in favor of the merger as it has been proposed. So I think you're probably right.
But does that mean a lot? I mean, sometimes you wonder about these huge, big meetings in the utility business, and all these guys fill the room, and they go on and on and on and on and on. At the end of the day, it all devolves into nothingness, like the IRP thing a few years ago, where it all went to nothing. And I wonder if it really means anything that if 28 or 29 of them say bad deal, don't do it. Does that really mean anything? I think probably the PUC can figure it out just as well as you and I, that they're in there just to say no, and that's not necessarily the substantive point to consider. It's merely advocacy rather than logical pros and cons.
Well, it's still early in the game for sure, and after the submission of testimonies by the interveners by July 20th, and then the consumer advocate has a number of more weeks after that to state, I believe, their preliminary testimony, and then you roll into, I believe it's in September, contested hearings, where it could go on for weeks weeks in Honolulu, where you've got 29 possible parties and the consumer advocate who will be allowed to question in a courtroom style fashion, if I'm not mistaken, question the applicant. So that gets us into the fall, and then after that, if I'm not mistaken, that's when the PUC commissioners will go on the road and host public hearings, 2 on the Big Island, 1 on Maui, 2 on Oahu, and I think 1 on Kauai. So I mean, this July 20th date is just the kind of the next significant marker of many more markers to come.
Well, I don't know. I get the feeling that it goes further and further off the track. When I say the track, I mean, is this really okay for improving service and rates in the state, or are we talking about issues that have really nothing to do with that?
Well, it circles back to the fundamental question that will be before the commissioners, assuming it actually does eventually get to them and something dramatic doesn't happen in the interim. Is it in the public interest, the best public interests of those people who live in the majority of the state other than Kauai? Kauai, even though they're not directly affected, I mean, they do have a co-op there, the KIUC, which of course is, it has to be in some ways affected by what's going on in the rest of the state, and they're an intervener, and they certainly are advocating for whatever position they feel they need to advocate for.
Everybody's got a position. So what about this, on HIEC, the Hawaii Island Energy Co-op, your organization? Mm-hmm. How does this affect you? Where are you on the continuum right now, Marco?
At the risk of being rather coy, Jay, I will tell you that we are pondering and we are studying, we are analyzing, and we definitely will be one of the interveners submitting testimony by the 20th of July. But I'm not willing and able to tip my hand at this point where we're going to come down.
What about the Maui County utility that they contemplate, the county power company they want to build? Where are they? Have you heard anything? Do you know anything?
I haven't really heard any recent news on that, other than I believe that the mayor's office put out an RFP for that available $30,000 they found in their budget, and I forget when the deadline is. Perhaps it's already passed, or it will be happening soon. But as I've said a number of occasions, you really $30,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in order to really do a serious due diligence on turning Maui Electric Company that's operating on not just 1, not just 2, but 3 islands there, Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. I mean, you need a heck of a lot more than $30,000 to really do what needs to be done to see what the issues are, what the challenges are, what the cost would be in order to turn MECO into a municipal utility.
Yeah, you got to buy its assets, or at least a lot of them, and including especially the transmission assets. And that goes for you too. I mean, you have to somehow find the money. It's not like you can just inherit them. You and the county of Maui, you're going to have to raise some money. I mean, does the county of Maui have the money? Do you have the money?
I can't speak for the county of Maui, and as far as HIEC, I can tell you that Richard Ha and I, and my fellow co-conspirators, I call them, are working very energetically and diligently to secure the adequate funding and support that we need to really do what we need to do. So it's a challenging time, but I'm fully confident that when push comes to shove, we will be adequately supported to be able to do what we need to do.
Okay, Marco, and the really good news is that on July 6th, you're going to be here in Honolulu, and we can try to do a show together in the flesh. Wouldn't that be nice?
I so look forward to that, and I can't wait to see your green room.
Yes, our new studio. You will be amazed, and you will be delighted. It is beautiful. Here in Pioneer 888. 888-888-888. Thank you, Marco Mangelsdorf. Thank you for joining us yet again, on Marco and Me, which plays every other week at noon on Monday. and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Always the highlight of my Monday, Jay, talking to you, if not the entire week. It sets a great tone for all the wonderful things to come.
Have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon, Marco. Aloha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.